I'm Adam Jennings, and this is Awaiting Approval, a podcast about the messy human side of creative leadership. Today, I'm joined by Bill Snebold, creative director with an impressive list of clients, including Paramount, Disney, Focus Features, and many more, for a relaxed, two-way conversation about his journey, the lessons he's learned, and what it takes to lead with creativity and honesty. Bill, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Adam. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. I'll start us off nice and light, and also in a way so that people get to know a little bit about you. If we were meeting in person today to record this, where would you suggest we meet and what would you order to drink?
Well, I'd probably order either iced tea or Diet Coke. Where we meet, probably someplace quiet, right? So yeah, I don't know. My office is actually very quiet, but and I'm in Agora Hills, and so it might be a good place to meet. But it would be a long flight for you. I have oak trees out my window, and I think they had to design this building around the oak trees because you're not allowed to cut down oak trees here. So you'll see these big oaks standing, and then they have to kind of architect around them. So it's a very nice environment to do that. I was lucky I got this office.
That sounds great. It sounds lovely, like sort of surrounded by nature. So I'll raise a metaphorical glass to give you cheers and set you off on this recording.
Thanks.
When was the last time you used pen and paper?
I use pen and paper for notes, and it's kind of fun because I used to draw all the time when I was, of course, a teenager, or before that, of course. But I used to draw a lot, and I feel like my drawing abilities have kind of withered on the vine a bit because I just don't need to do it very much anymore. If I need to do something, cook up an idea, I can actually just write a prompt in Midjourney or something. Or these days, actually, ChatGPT is a lot better at those things. It understands what you're doing. But my daughter is actually a very good artist. She's a junior in high school right now. Look at what she's doing, and I'm like, I really need to get back and hone my skills again in that department.
Do you find that you're sketching or drawing or creating by hand sort of at specific times? Like, is it a time when you're trying to deeply think about something, or when you're anxious about something?
As a creative director, you often have to do like thumbnails to like kind of work out your ideas, and so those can be pretty rough. I do a lot of that, so that's probably it's apart from taking notes, which my penmanship is really the worst. So I'm much more comfortable typing into some sort of app or something, or these days you can read into them or talk into them. So yeah, like thumbnails and that sort of thing. I brainstorming, trying to get things down, but I move very quickly into going digital as soon as I can.
What does that sort of process look like for you? Like, is there a digital place where you'll sketch? I mean, you mentioned about sort of generating something with maybe ChatGPT or something like that, but like if we think back not that long ago, even 18, 24 months without that, like where would your sort of go-to place to make a digital sketch be?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I'm going to do a sketch, I'll just use pen and paper or something. And then if I want to get into the system, then I might just grab my iPhone and just take a quick shot of it and then pull it into Photoshop or something if I need to. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. It's not that complicated.
So if we take a sort of hard swerve now in a different direction and we think about your career, I'd love to know if you could give us bullet points from the very first design or creative job you had all the way through to your first leadership position and then your first leadership position to where you are today.
Okay, so yeah, I've had a really varied career. I didn't go to like a really 4-year fancy college or anything studying design. I got very little guidance in the area when I was in high school from my parents or anybody. I had a friend of mine that I admired very well and very much, and she was my best friend's mother, who actually taught oil painting, and she was very accomplished in her own right in oil painting herself. She just did amazing work, and she suggested I go to this 2-year school because I told her I went to go tour this school that was started by Walt Disney in Valencia. And I went toward there, and my dad his only comment was, "Oh my God, this is so expensive." My dad was like working class, so he dug ditches for the city and stuff like that. So, anyways, I came up through the lowest possible ranks. I went to a 2-year school, learned commercial art, and this is before computers or anything were involved. This is in I graduated in '81 from there, and my very first job out of school was working for a typesetter. They used to have those back in the day, and they were located on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood. They used to have these things called PIP, Postal Instant Press, where people would go to take their resumes to get printed. But this one, because it was centered in Hollywood, was actually primarily doing resumes for actors. So you basically, as a actor, you get your headshots back in the day. They used to be black and white 8x10 headshots, and you'd staple your resume to the back of these headshots. So we were located in basically the attic above this postal instant press, and that's what I did all day. I did customer service, and then I went to there was me and another guy that did production art, which was basically all we did was we just trimmed out these things and pasted them on a board, like the typesetting that came out of the typesetting shop. And then they'd take them downstairs and give them to Pip, and then they'd run them for them. And I've met a couple old time kind of actors that way, but nobody you'd really recognize. Like but so that's where I got my start, is doing like paste up on a board, for these really simple resumes. And I think I was there for 6 months. And then she fired me because she said, you're too overqualified for this job. So I'm going to do you a favor. And she fired me and the guy I worked with. She didn't have anyone else to fill after that. I don't know what she did. She was a really nice woman though, but she was kind of strange. She fired us both on a Friday and said, "Okay, you're gone." And so I got a job in the night shift for a place that did um, newspaper breakdowns, which for the movies, right? So you used to go. I'm not sure if they even have these anymore. I'm sure they do. It's been a while since I've opened a newspaper, but you go and you'd see the key art broken down in black and white on all these different sizes, right? So that's what we did. This place, that's all they did. They did a lot of work for Universal, and I don't know if they did anything with Paramount. I know I worked on Ghostbusters because occasionally we do some key art for one sheets, but mostly it was newspaper breakdowns. And so I did a lot of that. It was just like nonstop. So I worked there for a couple of years. Then I did production art for a place called Telepictures that's still around, and was there for a few months. Eventually, computers came along in the mid '80s or late '80s, like desktop publishing revolution, and I got obsessed instantly because I was doing things, with hand drawn, pen and ink, repeatographs, and T squares and triangles and French curves and that sort of stuff to make logos and stuff like that. And I got very good at that stuff. But then as soon as the Mac came out, I went for that. And I was like, I can do like perfect circles, and I can do perfect lines with vectors and stuff, and I don't have to get my hands dirty or anything. And I don't have to refill any sort of pen or whatever. So that was a revelation. And also I really hated having to mark up type and give it to a typesetter only for them to complain when I wanted changes. So this was like I get control over what the type looks like, and I get to, not get my hands dirty. And so that was great. And I was like one of the only people that was doing that at the time in LA. And so I was kind of like on my own doing that. I was doing some work for RCA Columbia Home Video back in the day, and doing lots of packaging for them, doing design as a independent contractor. So I started out doing just like converting. At the time, video was a big thing, converting all their old packaging to the new style packaging they knew. Really, literally, it was like printing money for me at the time. And all I had to do was they ship me a bunch of boards, and I'd pull the stuff off there, and put new. No, I don't think I had a waxer. We used to use waxers at the time. I forgot to mention I worked at a newspaper too. I've kind of like done everything. I worked at a newspaper, hometown newspaper, doing production art. I went on press checks. I've stripped. I've done kind of like the pre-press work for printing. I just worked myself up until I eventually, through just people I happen to know, people that I used to know, someone at RCA Columbia Home Video. They ended up moving to Republic Pictures in Culver City. There was an outfit in Culver City that just started up by a group of people that used to work places like Dazoo and different places that were doing a lot of key art design for motion pictures. They happened to know this person at Republic. They said they had just lost their computer guy, who, because it was like there'd be like one computer, right? That they'd have a guy that would do the Photoshop work, which was like no layers. It's like Photoshop version 2 or something. And they said we needed somebody to replace him. They were like a group of 4 guys that started this thing up. They were working like crazy throughout, like every night was like late at night. They had like 3 hours sleep every night or something to keep up with all the work they were doing. They were doing work for Paramount Pictures and for a few other places, and they were just going crazy. One of the partners was like their computer guy, and he just couldn't take it anymore. He's just like, I gotta get out of this. He goes, what, you're a partner, you know, you have like a quarter share in this company. He goes, I don't want it. I gotta go. I can't take it anymore for my mental health. So they said they needed a guy that knew how to do that stuff and had a good eye. And so I went over there and I said, showed them my portfolio, and they said, okay, you know, you're hired. So I ended up doing all the late work and got to work on things like, let's see, what do I remember? We worked on Pet Cemetery, on My Cousin Vinny. These are like the one sheet posters. And this is before you did the finishes on the Mac and or on computer. Or you do them on computer, but they used Quantel paint boxes back in the day at that period of time for do these finishes digitally, which was still a new thing. So I kind of came up from that kind of analog to digital transition. Then when I was at this place, it was called Icon. So it was like that small group who were working ourselves to death. And I got married at the time to my current wife still. After let's see, it's we got married in '92, and she's still with me. I think we're just both very stubborn. But she stuck with me through all the late nights, but she let me have it a few times about that. You got to tell them. And I got so irritated with them because they wanted me to work another late night. It was like the night before I was supposed to leave to do our a rehearsal dinner, and I said, "No, I have to go. I'm out of here. Bye." And you're like trying to destroy my life, but still, it was fine. And anyway, so one of the guys that was there at Icon, one of the one of the partners, ended up being offered a position to start a new group at Paramount Pictures, which would be like kind of an in-house advertising agency there. And his name was Brian Allen, and he goes, "Dude, I want to make this completely digital shop there, and so I need your help to do that. And and would you want to work for Paramount Pictures?" I'm like, "Yes, please." And so then I ended up staying there for 5 years as an art director, um, and worked with an amazing group of people. And we had a fully digital shop. We even had our own like God, what are they called? They used to be called, I don't remember what they were called. The actual machines that we actually output our own type on. Because we're still doing some things traditionally because digital hasn't done the full swing yet. But Brian was very insistent that every office was going to have, including the production artists and the creative directors and the art directors would all have Macs on their desks. And we also had had drafting tables for doing that stuff. But it was really a great experience being there. And then after that, we were there for 5 years, and then Viacom came in and bought Paramount, and I guess that was like probably about a year before I left, maybe a year and a half before I left, and the bean counters came in, took them time to like go through everything, and then they basically pulled us all into a conference room and said, "Okay, you guys, we have to let you all go at the end of the year." And but it worked out fine because I started a new company that was formed by a group subgroup of the people that were at Paramount. And literally what happened was at the end of that year, I shut down my computer. I went off to the East Coast where my wife's family was for Christmas break. Came back. I got a call from my boss, and he said, "Hey, okay, so we got this space in Hollywood, and I made a deal with the president of worldwide marketing at Paramount that we could lease the old computers we were using at Paramount in the new place for $1 a month." So I come back to this new place. It wasn't as nice of a place, but it was a significant salary bump. So I didn't mind. And it flooded all the time when it rained. Luckily, it didn't rain that often. But I came in the first day, and there's my computer, and I booted it up, and all my files were still there. So it was almost like I didn't even leave. So that was crazy. And then I was there, and then I was with that company for the next 10 years. And in that time, the internet was happening, right? It actually started, the World Wide Web started when I was still back in Paramount. I did a art design websites for Mission Impossible 1, 2, and 1 and 2. I'm trying to remember which one's one. One was at Paramount, and two, I think, was at Faction, which was the new company. So I got involved in that. So I became the guy that was doing the websites at that time. Actually, what started out in Paramount is our copywriter was the guy who was doing the first websites because they were basically simple, just HTML tags, and he could write those. But actually, after they got a little more complicated and involved, and uh, they started to say, okay, we need to actually design these. They can't just be like Word documents, right? I remember that the president of Worldwide Motion Pictures at Paramount actually said when the World Wide Web started happening, he was like looking at it and didn't understand. He goes, this is like you're standing on the street corner handing out flyers for this movie. What are you guys doing? He didn't really get it. But I was all gung ho about it because it seemed just like something new. From the moment I saw it, from the very beginning, the mid '90s, I logged on to. I had one of those classic Macintoshes at our house. It's the only Mac I had at the time, and the little 19-inch grayscale monitor. And we were accessing the internet through AOL at first, right? That was all people would get these CDs in with their magazines that would let you download the software because people weren't downloading software over the internet yet. And then you'd install AOL, and that was your idea of what the internet was. It had a little thing that lets you go out onto the World Wide Web, and it was pretty cringy at the time. The initial World Wide Web was really something. I don't know how old are you?
48.
48. Okay, so yeah, all right. So you're definitely
Yeah, I lived through the whole 14.4 modems. Yeah.
yeah. No, I'm 63, so I saw that entire transition. It was really really fascinating. I loved that whole thing. Through the 80s and the 90s. That was like really a great time to be alive. So when I was at Faction for those 10 years, when we formally started up the our internet group, because we were getting lots of demands from primarily from Scott Rudin, who's a well-known producer. He produced a lot of really famous movies. Sleepy Hollow. I don't know if I can't remember what his most famous ones on. So many he's behind. He was demanding those guys that did our websites for us at Paramount. You need to get them. They need to do these websites for us. And they kept harassing my boss for a while, and I eventually relented, and we started an internet group, and he made me the creative director of the internet group. So that's why, and I led a team of like 4 designers at the time, and we started with, and then it kind of broadened out to more. We had a couple full-time programmers. One guy was really great. He was more instrumental in doing the kind of the game stuff. We did a lot of that stuff. It was all like, oh, we have to make a game for every movie we're marketing for some reason. They weren't websites weren't very profitable for our company actually. Because they were kind of like, whereas with like a one sheet poster or even like, a TV spot or anything like that, it's like it got a finite amount of space or finite amount of time that you got to fill. But the internet is like endless. You can keep adding content until your heart's content, and their heart's never content, right? And they always want the latest, most amazing thing. This has got to be whatever we did last time. It's got to be 10 times more impressive than this on this next film, because all they ever care about is opening day, is making opening day, building that excitement. And then so that's true for the posters, anything you're doing is they're all trying to lead up to that opening day number to make that as high as they can. And they don't care what they have to do to get there, so there's always one more thing. And so they'd ask us for the world, especially on these websites. And so we'd be building out all these virtual worlds like Titanic. I was still over at Paramount at the time we did Titanic. And even then it was like, oh, we got to get all these QuickTime VR nodes all to link up so people can like actually go through, and we had to like retouch all the nodes because with Titanic they only built half the ship basically. So I don't know if you knew this about Titanic. They really only built half the interior of the ship. There were probably certain rooms where they didn't, but most of like if you had state rooms, like it was like what is it, the starboard or port side? I don't know which one they built, but they built out the starboard and they just basically mirror imaged everything for the other side, which meant they had to mirror image all the clothing and everything about it, right? So then they'd flop it again, right? So they didn't have the other half of the ship. So when we were building out the nodes and they had photographed this VR nodes for the Titanic, parts of the ship weren't there, or they just had certain things they weren't going to be filming. So if they had the ballroom and they were only going to do a certain angle, if you turn around 180 degrees, that part of the boat wasn't even there. So we had to like retouch all those nodes so like you could do a full 360 or figure out a way around it by obscuring it somehow with something. So we did a lot of that. So it was a lot of work. So basically, my first formal creative director position was with Faction, Beverly Hills, for I don't know, it's probably like 6 years of that, 10 years maybe or something like that. I don't remember how long it was. And then I left there and I formed my own thing, and here we are.
Fantastic. I love it. And there's so much to unpack there. Hi. If what you're hearing is resonating with you where you are in your leadership journey right now, stay tuned until the end. I'll share details on how you can work directly with me to level up your creative leadership. I mean, and
Yeah,
as someone who, sort of saw that whole explosion of the internet and storytelling on the internet, I know exactly what you mean about having to fix stuff. These ideas we have, like the Titanic VR nodes, right? And it'd be great. You can travel all the way through the ship. And that sounds great on paper, but then when it actually lands on your desk to put it together, there's so many little things that are either tech that can't keep up with the idea, or you're missing some kind of asset or something like that. So that rings true for so many projects I worked on. I did a lot of digital marketing for Fox and for Paramount and for Sony for various different titles. And so there was always
mhm,
something that needed to be created from nothing. You mentioned about making the key art for various movies, and that was always the start of the projects for me, receiving the key art and finding what I had
mhm.
and what I had to work with. And I always loved, like genuinely, I always loved diving into those files and seeing how they were built. The ingenuity that people like you had in pulling that stuff together from often nothing. I remember one
Right.
particular poster, and I won't say what it was from, and I won't say what studio it was, but it involved someone sitting on a chair. And I was so surprised because it would have been so simple in your head, even though I'd done this for many, many years and worked on hundreds of campaigns and I knew this was how it was done. When I saw that picture, I thought, okay, yeah, fine. They got the actor to sit on a chair in a studio and they took a shot. But no, everything,
No,
every element was a little stock image, right the way down to the chair, which still had the iStock photo watermark on when you started removing all of the layers,
that's
right the way
funny.
back down
Well,
to the
that
chair.
then they didn't license it, did they?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that's why I'm kind of not
Well,
saying
maybe
who it
they
was or
just
what the
didn't
film was.
bother to replace it for that piece or something. Yeah, no, it's I guess
Yeah.
really when the way I think about it when you're like designing or art directing for these things or from a creative director standpoint is really you're just trying to solve a problem, right? A creative problem or a marketing goal for your client. And how you get there, you can use a variety of technology or techniques or whatever, but you have to stay focused on that thing, right? And you use whatever's at your disposal. So these days we're using AI, but I definitely see that there's almost like a blind spot to a certain extent that I mean I see right away, but I think some of the newer people coming up, and they see AI and they think it's just something you can just type a prompt into and expect to get something finished out of. And it's just not that way. I don't even look at it that way. So I've used AI's come a long way, but it's still got a lot of holes in it as far as what you can do. But and what sometimes you think I'm going to be able to do this thing very easily in mid journey in 2 seconds because it sounds like it should be super easy, and it'll be like that thing that is like the thing that really trips you up. Like you'll be spending the next few hours like trying to bang your head against the wall trying to get the thing you actually want. You think this has got to. Why is it having a hard time understanding what I want? It's not that hard. Even if you show it something. But and so you're always surprised, but you're just like, okay, well, this is one resource out of a whole variety of resources I have at my disposal. Maybe it's not like, like every, like they say, is it to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. it doesn't have to be that way, right? So you see people like come to AI and they're like, oh, well, this is the magic thing that's going to do it all for me. And maybe one day it will, maybe one day it'll get there. But even Photoshop isn't that way, right? And it's you can't do everything in one program because I've been doing this for years. I mean, I use Photoshop and then I need to jump into Illustrator and then I then jump into Blender to do something that I want to have a certain way, you know? And it's all in service of whatever the concept is. How do I elevate this concept and really strip away all the stuff that isn't communicating what I want to communicate on behalf of what the marketing goals are for the client? Because that's what we're really doing. You know, it's not my platform for creative expression. You know, it's fine if I get to express something that is unique or it has such an interesting take on something. But at the end of the day, if that interesting take isn't communicating the goals, you know, what we're trying to communicate for the marketing purpose, right? It needs to be thrown away and you need to start over. So I'm always in the back of my head, I'm thinking that. And if I'm directing anyone towards something, it's like, how do we elevate this concept? Tools that we need to use at our disposal to elevate this concept and really crystallize it into something that communicates what we need to communicate. I mean, I hear people all the time. I just today I got off the phone with somebody and they're always dissing the client. And I'm like, and I want to say, stop. Why? Why are you doing that? The client isn't an art director. The client is not an expert in your field. You're there to help them get to where they need to go. But the at the end of the day, they're coming at it from a different mindset. Their mindset isn't wrong and it's not stupid. It's like different. It's different because I have stuff rejected by the client. And if it's rejected, I'm like absorb that and I go, okay, well, either missed something that was not communicated, maybe it wasn't communicated to me clearly, or maybe something changed in the requirements that you know, since I presented, and now what I presented isn't really applicable anymore, you know. And it wasn't because, and just because things that they took my precious concept that I labored over for hours and hours, and they don't love it, you know, so terrible. No, it's like, oh, okay, you needed something different, you know. It's you're the one
Yeah.
paying for it. You're the client. You're looking at your goals and what you need to achieve. And so I'm trying to help you do that. That's all it is, you know. So I always have to shake my head at that attitude, like, oh, the client, I got to deal with them, you know. I don't even look at it that way.
I love that. And it's really interesting because I've noted over the years, I've noticed in general terms, a difference in how creative teams respond to that sort of challenge geographically. When you work with a creative team in the UK, again, generally speaking, there is a sense that it's not cool to think that the client is cool or that the work is cool,
Mhm.
right? You have to be a little bit aloof somehow. You have to be a little bit sort of sarcastic about it. You know, you can't say, you know what, I'm actually really loving working on this. It's brilliant. Like that doesn't happen that often. And when you work with creative teams, East Coast in the States, there's no time for that. It's not that it's not cool. It's
Mhm.
just no, next thing right now, keep going, keep go, 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 go. And when you work with creative teams on the West Coast, again, generally speaking, there's far more openness about, I love this client. I love what they're trying to do. I'm
Mhm.
really aligned with this, you know, and it's
Mhm.
really interesting to me to see those differences, those cultural differences. And I'm sure, you know, think if I were to think through teams I've worked with in other countries as well, there would be many more differences there to unpack. But love what you're saying about it's our job to interpret what the client needs and is trying to achieve. And then how do we as storytellers help them get that? How do we help them tell the story in the best way possible to get the best return possible? And sometimes that means having an idea we think is fantastic and having that rejected and having to go to something different. And I think there's a big learning for all creatives at some point. I think we all have that one project where that clicks, where we
Mhm.
start to step aside from our ego and go, oh, yeah, okay. I actually now, in the cold light of day, I can look at what the client has suggested over what I initially pitched. And yeah,
Mhm.
I get it. It was better. It worked better for the project or for the goal. I get it. You know, and that's always a kind of pivotal moment.
I totally I yeah, I look back on some periods where I felt really embarrassed looking back at them. But there were learning times, you know. I remember working on I'm not sure what website it was, but it was for a website and I poured my heart into it and thinking this is like perfect now. This is exactly what it needs to be. And it went to the client, and we had a meeting, and I got defensive about it when they didn't love it as much as I did, where they were asking, for changes to it. I was like, and I'm thinking, but this is perfect. What is wrong with you? And my boss, after the call, after I become so defensive, and he talked to me, pulled me aside, and he was actually pretty nice about it. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something that, but what is your purpose? What are you I think in this client relationship, what is your purpose, or what is this purpose towards this project? And he wanted me to answer the question, right, rather than just tell me you're supposed to be doing it this way, you're supposed to listen to the client, you're supposed to, because he knew that if he just asked me, that I'd go, yeah, I'm here to serve the client's needs. I'm not here to serve my interpretation of what the client should want, right? And no matter
Yeah.
how much of it's good that I'm pouring my passion and everything into it, and I'm coming up with something that I think is a really good solution. But then I have to be humble, and I have to step away and go, does this work for you? If it doesn't, great. Let's find out what where we messed up, or where the gap is here, so we can close that gap and get
Mm.
to what you want. So it's definitely a learning process all along the way.
What, like, I'd love to kind of flip that. When you think back across all the projects you've worked on, what's one piece of work that you're really proud of?
A lot of things that got rejected, actually. Believe it or not. I don't know. I like this one, like, quite a bit. This has been in my office for a while, but I like this one quite a bit. Is that in reverse for you? It
No,
looks like it's
it's
a
the right way
reverse for
around.
me. No, it is? Okay, so it's just for me what it shows at me, mirror image. That was for the international campaign for Ice Age 2, and so that was my concept for it. It was basically still lifted from the teaser trailer, but adapted, had to do some work to adapt it to a one sheet poster, but it was received very well, so I guess I hit the mark on that one. And they liked it so much that the domestic marketing group actually saw the poster and goes, oh my god, we got to do that for domestic as well. And so they ended up adapting it badly. I didn't work on it. They adapted it badly for the domestic one, where they kind of changed it to the point where, like, he wasn't beautiful enough, I guess, the Scrat character. They took a different version of the Scrat character, and they brightened up the water too much, to the point where you're like, okay, that doesn't look like he's underwater, guys, but it was out of my hands. Let go. But I'm proud of that. It's hard to, because I'm always focused on the latest thing I'm doing. So, gosh, so many things over the years that I've worked on, from websites that I love doing to I did something, my career's changed over the years, so it was, as I said, it was going from working at a newspaper all the way through websites, and I've done packaging, and I've done Flash websites as well as traditional websites, and, Web 2.0, and then I've even designed and programmed an app for the iPhone, and all sorts of things. So it's kind of changed over the years. Lately, it's been social media. I've done a lot of work for ABC, and there was one I did for the Connors, which was like where it was like a coming soon for the Connors, and there was an idea for doing a washing or a dryer. That's what it was, like a dryer. If you're like looking at a dryer and the clothes are tumbling, and I had something that said one more day or something. I can't remember what it actually said, but it was the letters, like one day or 1 week or something like that. So they're saying it's one more week left for the Connors, and it said that in the actual narration. But that was so well received for this social media post that they ended up adapting it for an actual TV spot that was aired on television. So I'm very proud of that. I don't know. Mission Impossible 2 website was a big deal. That's ages ago now. Which Mission Impossible are we at now? It's like Mission Impossible 10 or something now. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, there's been a few over the years.
I love that you called out that Ice Age 2 poster, because I did digital on all of the Ice Age movies, and that one, and I'm not just like, this is kismet, right? I'm not just blowing smoke. You and I have been connected on
Okay.
LinkedIn for a while. We've never worked together directly. We've never spoken in detail. And when I saw that, when you turned the camera on before we started recording, that was my favorite piece of key art from Ice Age 2 when I did the international digital campaign. And I
Oh
love
my
that poster.
God.
It's fantastic to get you
That's
and chat with you,
funny.
and then for you to pull that one out as a piece that you specifically like, because I love that too. The humor in that, the story in that is just instant. It doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter where you see it.
Yeah.
We've already know the Scrat character from the first movie, and so you just get it straight away. Like this poor sod who has no luck whatsoever, and suddenly he finds
He's
himself
like clinging on. He's
surrounded.
clinging on to that acorn for dear life with all these piranha, prehistoric piranha all around him. Yeah, because it, like you said, it tells a story, right? And that's what our
Yeah.
job is. Like communicate something. It communicates it in a second what's going on, and it's like yes, there's a whole and the moment you see it, there's a whole story that goes on in your head. You don't even have to. No one has to tell you anything, right? It's like yeah, and it's funny because those Sprat things. I don't think he's even a main character in the actual final movie, right? He's like always the one that they have for the teasers where you follow him through this entire thing where he's trying to get this acorn. So it's funny, but it's that you really connect with that character, his desperation for just survival. But
We've all been there,
that's fun.
right? I think that's why that character resonates. We've all had those moments of utter despair where no matter how hard you try, something will break or fall over or trip or you'll drop it or whatever it might be.
Right.
When you think about all of the work, and you think about all of those places, you gave us that really lovely kind of bullet point history of your career. Is there a moment in one of those places you've worked where you'd go back to who you were then, knowing what you know now? And if there is, where would it be and what would you say to yourself?
Um, I guess what I would say is when opportunities come along, you have to look at the opportunities and see if you should maybe go for it, really. I mean, I'm going to admit some regret here, but there was a guy you worked with named Josh Munchnick at Paramount Pictures. And there was a period of time, so just as the internet, the World Wide Web was starting to really kind of like steamroll, right, and become a thing. Because at first it was just like this curiosity almost, and but then as we started doing more of these websites for motion pictures, it like okay, there's a need for this, right? And I enjoyed working on all that stuff. But Josh actually said, okay, I'm leaving Paramount, and I'm throwing in with a couple other guys, and we're going to start this thing or this company where we're doing this work for the studios to help build these things out. And he ended up doing very well with it, I gotta say. And I'm like looking at that and like, oh, did I miss something there? Should I've like got stepped away from I mean, at this point, I had started like, as I said, like as a production artist and rose through the ranks and ended up at Paramount Pictures. And I felt extremely fortunate. I felt like, working at that studio was like being on a college campus, really. It just had that kind of vibe to it. I'd walk outside our offices to go across the lot to where you could buy lunch over at the commissary. On the way, it'd be a beautiful sunny day. You look up and you see the Hollywood sign right there above just beyond the studio there. And it was just like such a wonderful place. I couldn't imagine giving that up willingly, but he did. He even hired me to help them, because I was doing a little bit of work on the side too. So he hired me to because we were doing. I don't think Flash was a thing yet. I think at this point it was still Macromedia Director people were using to make little games maybe, and they had Shockwave. I don't know if you remember any of this. Let's see,
Yeah, I remember Shockwave, yeah.
Shockwave just before Future Splash was acquired by Macromedia and became Flash, and then later to Adobe. Right there was Macromedia Director and Shockwave, and I think we were using Shockwave to do some games, but and I did that with them a little bit, and then later Flash. But he ended up growing this company like crazy. Like they had so much work, and I kind of look back and I go, maybe that would have been a good thing to do back then. Honestly, you're kind of like talking like, well, if you had if you go back, like one of these people, like, well, I'd be able to take the stock market with me. What was going to happen in the stock market? I'd be able to do some bets on certain companies like Apple back in the 80s or something like that and be, a zillionaire now. So kind of similarly with my career, I could have like, really kind of probably even gone a little farther. Then again, when the iPhone came out, that was another opportunity right there. And it's like with all these things, like I did because I'm naturally kind of bored, because I do see other people in the industry who kind of like lock into doing a very niche thing. Like they'll do finishes, right? They're retouchers and they build out the finished versions of the artwork at high res, and that's all they do. And like, oh man, and they're doing very well at it. But I'm just like, just don't think I could do just that. You're really going like, I'm just going to like be masking stuff out endlessly and matching someone else's comp and retouching these tiny details to the nth degree, like over and over and over again for years. I just don't think I could do it. So I'm always like, ooh, what's the new thing out now? What can I do with it? Ooh, that looks interesting. So, that was the World Wide Web. That was the Mac when it came out. Service bureaus back in the 80s? The 80s. I didn't know what time frame I'm in. And there was one in Hollywood and there was one in downtown LA that I was aware of. I think later there was one in the valley too. But I'd have to like I'd have my stuff on floppy disks and I like drive them out to these places that have them output to either film or paper because that's what you needed to do at the time. I used to before Kinko's with FedEx Office, I used to go to Kinko's in Studio City and rent time on their Macs. They were just Mac Pluses at the time. Mac Pluses? I think so. There was the Mac, original Mac, and there was Mac Plus. It was still like monochrome displays or something. Maybe they were grayscale displays. I used to bring my own fonts on floppy disks and install them and launch. And I guess I must have installed freehand. I can't remember at this point. But I used to do work on these things, and I'd use their printers, and so I pay per hour for the rental. I can't imagine doing that now. It's so insane. And then I used to rent computers for myself from time to time because I was just like so obsessed with this new thing. But I did the same thing with the websites. I did the same thing with, I mean, 3D wasn't really new. Well, I guess it was kind of a new thing. Yeah, it was kind of a new thing. There wasn't that many people doing 3D at a certain point, but I started doing 3D because it was an interesting new thing. And the World Wide Web was an interesting new thing, new venue that I was like could figure out and look into and what are the capabilities. The iPhone when it came out, my wife was pregnant in 2005. That wasn't the iPhone yet, but it was the web. She was pregnant in 2005 with our son, and he was born in June 2005. So she went into labor. Not sorry. She went into she began having contractions, and we had gone through the classes, and they said you're supposed to write down, keep notes on the contractions. You're supposed to look at the clock, write the time, and when the contraction's over, note what time, and then you figure out what the interval is between them. And as they get too close, and you're supposed to go to the hospital because it's time for you to give birth. They don't want you there too early because they're just going to tell you to go home. And so we were starting to do this thing where she'd have contractions and then they go away or whatever. I'm like, oh, I bet there's an easier way to do this. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning. Why don't I just, at the time I was into Flash, why don't I just make a little Flash app that would keep track of the time for me? And I'll make it easy. When she starts having a contraction, I'll hit the space bar and it'll start the timer. And then I hit it again, that'll be the end of the contraction. And that was the entire thing. And it was very simple. It was super, super simple. It was nothing else to it. It was just a way to log them. I could have done it in HTML maybe but this was like the easiest way for me to do it at the time, the quickest way. So it was literally between her contractions while she was resting. I was on my laptop and I was like programming this thing in Flash. And then eventually, so I was up all night and then I finished it and then I was able to start logging them. And she was kind of cursing at me at the time. Why are you over here helping me rather you're on there programming? I was like, okay, I'm helping you, don't worry. So then eventually I was like, oh, I have this Flash app. It looked like crap, but it was good enough for me. And then I was like, maybe if I put a pretty interface on it and I'll put it up on the web and other people can have it. And I called Contraction Master. And then I put some Google ads with it on the page, and I made like $50 a month or something on it. And then I had a buddy who also had worked with me at Paramount Pictures. He had communicated to me. He said, his wife was going through labor or going. They were having a baby, not going through labor yet. And he was at one of the Lamaze classes, and they said, "Oh, and by the way, if you want help timing your contractions, there's this app called Contraction Master." And so it made its way through because no one had done this yet. And I said, "Oh, that's so funny." But at this point, I'd actually gone because the iPhone came out, and I'm like, I should make this app so you could use it on your iPhone because who wants to drag out their laptop because everyone's got a phone on them now. So I made a Contraction Master app that you had to pay to download, and I'm actually making a decent amount of money just from downloads. And it was kind of funny. Pro tip was I think I originally had it for $1.99. And then I think I've read somewhere that, well, if you raise the price, that people think it's worth more and they're willing to pay more for it. It's like a perceived value. And so I just said, okay, I'll just raise it for $2.99. And you end up having fewer sales, but the markup makes up for the fewer sales. Like, so you actually make more revenue that way. But so it actually works. So if you need to price anything, that's a good pro tip. Um, so I've been exposed to that other new shiny thing too. So and now the AI revolution is upon us, and some people are looking at it as, what do I need to do to avoid losing my job? But partly me, I'm just like obsessed. I'm just like, what is this thing? This is incredible that you can type in words and it gives you these images. And I started with Dolly. I'd received I think it was like 2022 or 2023, must have been 2022 summer. They send me an email. OpenAI sent me an email, and it said, "Oh, you had asked for an invitation to join this beta for DALL-E, and now it's open to you." I'm like, I didn't remember even signing up for this, and I started playing with it, and I was just like, "No way, this is insane! Are you kidding me?" And just like, and then that's all true. I was just like, what can this thing do? Can I make things that I can sell with this? Can it make art for me that I can use in any of my work? What can I do with this? So I was just obsessed with it. I'll show you. Let's see. As far as like what I love, what I see on LinkedIn all the time is people putting stuff up there that has not been. It's not work, right? It's not. There's no work. They're putting up things that are, they're putting up, they're generating stuff in Midjourney or wherever, and it's just fun stuff. It's not anything they're doing to a creative spec, to a creative brief that's trying to solve an actual creative problem, right? It's all like, look at this, looks so cool. But I was way into it. This was last year, I think. And I was working with Paramount, or not Paramount, with PBS at the time. And they came to me and they said, this show called Marie Antoinette. And they were doing it's not a documentary. It was a dramatized version of her life. I actually didn't see it. I need to go back and watch it. I'm not convinced. But they said they're partnering with this little cake, this company that sends out cakes. And so, she's famous for this line that she actually didn't say, called where she says, "Let them eat cake." And so they said, we're going to do a whole thing. We're going to send out these packages to these social media influencers and a few other people. So we're doing this limited run, and they have a box that we need to design the packaging for, that's going to have to incorporate our key art. I didn't do the key art for this, but they wanted me to create some packaging. I'm like, well, I could just wrap the back box in key art or whatever, the pieces that they gave me. All they had was Marie Antoinette kind of like against this sky background where she's kind of like falling or something, or hovering in front of a sky backdrop. I said, or I could do something a little more interesting that looks like something you would treasure or something, right? Something that Marie Antoinette might like from that era. And so I came up with this design. All these, whoops, dropping it. I have two of these, so if I ruin this one, it's okay. So I rendered out a whole bunch of things in Midjourney, and I was like blown away because I would never find any of the stuff in a stock website. You just wouldn't find it, and not to the specs that I was looking for, right? And I was kind of like doing it. So I rendered out all these different pieces. So that piece, this stuff here, that architectural detail. and then this kind of thing. That's like Midjourney, and these little, details on the side. So you end up with, rather than just a plain box, you have something that's kind of cool looking. And then I did the same thing. Well, this is the outside of it is just there's nothing on the bottom. And you open it up. So it was designed so you take the lid off and then you open it like this. And then on the inside, you've got a plate, and there's the key art basically. And you've got, this frame, this oval frame, and you've got these lovely silverware. And that's all rendered in Midjourney. And I was just like blown away. And and there were so many options. It wasn't like it just rendered out one cool one. It was like rendered out all this stuff. I think this is like in version 4 or 5. Now it probably couldn't render any of this stuff. Because you go back in the newer versions of Midjourney, and it's like the stuff you could do before that was really cool, you can't do anymore. But sometimes you can. It really depends what it is. I have to go back to see if it'll. Just crazy.
It's amazing, and I love your enthusiasm for the new thing, for the new tech, for the new route, for the new creative process. So much so that unfortunately we've run out of time. So I would love to have you back for a second episode. No, I would.
Cool.
This is a really fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. But before we go, I have one final question, and it's the same final question that I ask every single guest. Are you, Bill, still awaiting approval?
Am I still awaiting approval? Always. Approval from myself. That's what it is. Like, that's kind of a leading question. It's a little open-ended. Am I awaiting approval? I'm waiting approval from various people, and it's kind of like a yes and no answer. I kind of like go headlong into these things without approval. Honestly, dude, I went ahead and used Midjourney on some stuff, and I ended up losing some contracts because of it. I did the same thing back in the 80s. I get so obsessed with these things and it's funny because I said that it's all about what the client needs, and it always is. But I do end up going out on these things where I get obsessed with these tools to the point where I end up pushing them a little bit farther past where the client is ready to accept it, and then I have to backstep a little bit. But whatever, what to tell you, I'm sure I should be more cautious. But then, as I said before, there are opportunities that come, and I'm somewhere on that spectrum, right? I'm somewhere on that spectrum where I'm like, want to push that boundary, and then I'm also not the person that pushes it as far as maybe I think I could or should sometimes. So in certain ways, I'm still waiting for approval. In other ways, I'm not.
I love it. Bill, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure we'll have another conversation again soon.
I've enjoyed it. This has been something. This has been really great. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to Awaiting Approval. If you're a creative leader or stepping into a leadership position and want support that's honest, practical, and tailored to you, I'd love for you to come and join my Supercharged Creative Leaders Program. It's a 4-week course built around 8 pre-recorded modules, 4 live sessions with me and the rest of your cohort, a private Slack space for you to ask questions and go deeper together, plus ongoing access to my alumni community once you complete the course. Each cohort is capped at just 6 people, so you'll always get personal attention, real feedback, and space to grow. And if you want to tailor the journey further, you can book extra one-to-one sessions with me, and we can dig deeper into the challenges you're facing right now. I built this program based on everything I wish I'd known when I started leading creative teams. No fluff, no jargon, just the tools, frameworks, conversation, and clarity that will actually move you forward. Spots go quickly, so if this sounds like the right fit for you, go to growwithadamjennings.com to book your place on the next cohort. Previous attendees have gone on to win major pitches, land new roles, get promoted, and step into leadership with more clarity, confidence, and purpose. You can find out more and book your place on the next cohort at growwithadamjennings.com. I can't wait to start working with you. Awaiting Approval is a Cordial Fox production, hosted by Adam Jennings, produced by Adam Jennings and Jasmine Egner.